My husband didn't just cheat on me, he rewrote our history. So I decided to rewrite his future. My name is Eleanor Vance, and for 15 years, I was what you might call a professional wife. Not in the sense of a kept woman, far from it. My husband Julian was the star, the visionary architect whose name was whispered in the same breath as modern legends. His firm, Vance and Sterling, designed gleaming skyscrapers that reshaped city skylines. And I was the Sterling. The silent partner, the bedrock, the one who managed the chaos so he could have the clarity to create. I ran our lives with the precision of a Swiss watch. I managed our finances, our social calendar, our home, our investments. I curated his image, organized the charity galas he chaired, and made sure the right people always saw his best side. I was the architect of him, and I was damn good at my job. Our life was a masterpiece of controlled elegance. A sprawling minimalist home in the Pacific Palisades, with glass walls overlooking the ocean. A life filled with gallery openings, TED Talks, and quiet weekends in Napa. We were a power couple, a brand. We were perfect. The first sign that our foundation was cracked wasn't a lipstick stain or a late-night text. It was a book. A slim volume of poetry by some obscure modern mystic poet named Serafina. It appeared on Julian's bedside table one day. Julian didn't read poetry. He read blueprints and biographies of titans of industry. When I asked about it, he was dismissive. "Oh, a colleague recommended it. A bit overwrought, isn't it?" But I saw him reading it, his brow furrowed in concentration, underlining passages with a pencil. Then came the changes in him. He started talking about authenticity. He, a man who built monuments to corporate power, suddenly started criticizing our materialistic existence. He started taking long, solitary walks on the beach at dawn. He, who had always been a pragmatist, started using words like soul and resonance, unironically. I initially chalked it up to a midlife crisis, a cliché as old as time. I tried to be supportive. I suggested we take a trip, something different, maybe a spiritual retreat in Bali. He looked at me with a kind of pity that made my blood run cold and said, "You wouldn't get it, Elle. It's not something you can schedule." The discovery, when it came, was fittingly modern and soul-crushingly public, yet private. I wasn't looking for anything. I was researching a potential competitor for an acquisition Julian's firm was considering. I was deep in the digital rabbit hole of a boutique design collective in Portland when I saw it. A guest post on their blog. The title was Deconstructing the Gilded Cage, A Search for Truth in a Fabricated World. The author was Jay Vance. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked. It was him. It was Julian. But it was a version of him I had never met. He wrote with a raw, bleeding passion about feeling trapped in a life of beautiful surfaces and hollow cores. He wrote about the suffocating comfort of success, the silent scream of a soul yearning for something real. He wrote about our life. He didn't name me, but he didn't have to. I was the curator of the cage, the master of the beautiful lie. And then, in the final paragraphs, he wrote about her. Serafina, his muse, his spiritual counterpart. He described meeting her at a poetry reading in some dimly lit bar in Silver Lake. She wasn't just a poet. She was an artist, a sculptor, a woman who lived in a converted warehouse downtown, who ate from farmers' markets, and who saw the fractures in the universe and made them beautiful. She was, in his words, the embodiment of everything my life is not: messy, unpredictable, and devastatingly real. The post was a love letter, disguised as a philosophical manifesto. It was a betrayal not just of my body, but of my entire existence. He hadn't just found another woman. He had found a new ideology that cast me as the villain of his story. The comment section was filled with praise from a chorus of strangers. So brave, beautifully written. I feel this in my soul. They were applauding the demolition of my life. I didn't cry. Crying is a passive act, a release of pressure. What I felt was a cold, clarifying rage. It settled in my bones like a glacier. It wasn't the hot, messy anger of a woman scorned. It was the focused, calculated fury of a master architect whose magnum opus had just been declared a prison. He thought our life was a cage? Fine. I would show him what a real cage looked like. My revenge wouldn't be a wrecking ball. It would be a blueprint. I confronted him that night. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I waited until he was sitting in his Eames chair, staring out at the perfectly calm ocean, and I sat down opposite him. I had printed out his blog post. I placed it on the marble coffee table between us. "This is beautifully written, Julian," I said, my voice as calm and flat as the sea outside. A bit overwrought, perhaps, but passionate. The color drained from his face. He looked from the papers to my eyes, and for the first time in 15 years, he looked truly afraid of me. He stammered, he denied, then he crumbled. The confession came in a torrent of self-pity and justification. He loved me, of course, but not in the right way. I was his partner, his best friend, but Serafina... She touched his soul. He said he was going to tell me. He was just waiting for the right moment. He told me he wanted to leave, to shed this inauthentic life and find himself. He wanted to live simply, to create art for its own sake, not for a commission. He wanted to be free. I listened. I let him say it all. I let him paint his pathetic, romantic fantasy of a starving artist's life. And when he was done, panting and exhausted, I looked him in the eye and said the 4 words that would become his undoing. "I will help you." He stared at me, dumbfounded. "What?" "I've been holding you back," I said, my voice dripping with manufactured sincerity. "Your blog post. It made me realize. You are a brilliant artist trapped in the body of a businessman. I can't stand in the way of your soul's journey. I want you to be free, truly free." The relief on his face was disgusting. He thought he was getting away with it. He thought I was making it easy. He had no idea. The game had just begun. My revenge had 3 phases. Phase 1, the liberation. The next morning, I went to work. Julian thought I would be calling a divorce lawyer. I did, but not for the reasons he thought. I engaged the most ruthless, creative financial attorney in Los Angeles, a woman named Harriet Shaw, who was known for her unconventional settlements. I explained the situation to Harriet, not as a wronged wife, but as a project manager with a very specific goal. "I don't want to ruin him," I explained, leaning forward in her stark, white office. "I want to give him exactly what he says he wants. I want to build him a 5-star, fully funded, inescapable prison of authenticity." Harriet's thin lips curled into what might have been a smile. "I like this," she said. "First, the finances. We didn't split our assets 50-50. That would be too simple, too messy. Instead, I proposed we create the Vance Artistic Trust. I would be the sole administrator. I seeded it with a generous but not obscene portion of our liquid assets, about $3 million. Julian's eyes went wide when he heard the number. He saw a golden parachute. He didn't read the fine print. The terms of the trust, drafted by the brilliant Harriet, were a work of art. The funds could only be accessed for expenses directly related to the pursuit of artistic and spiritual endeavors. This included art supplies, studio rent, travel for inspirational purposes, and basic living expenses, provided the recipient was not engaged in any formal, non-artistic employment. All expenditures required receipts and a written justification, submitted to me for approval. I was no longer his wife. I was his patron, his funding board. Next, his career. Julian wanted to be free from the golden handcuffs of his firm. So, I freed him. I called an emergency meeting with the other senior partners at Vance and Sterling. I didn't expose his affair. I spun a beautiful, tragic story. I told them Julian was having a profound creative crisis, that the pressures of corporate architecture were crushing his artistic soul. I showed them his blog post, framing it as a cry for help. I told them he wanted to step away, to reconnect with his roots as a pure artist. They were stunned, then sympathetic. Architects are artists, after all. They understood the impulse. I proposed a generous severance package and a clean break, allowing him to resign with his reputation intact. I even orchestrated a farewell party where people gave speeches about his brave decision to follow his passion. He stood there, looking bewildered and celebrated, as I systematically dismantled his professional life. Finally, the social aspect. I sent a carefully worded email to our entire circle of friends and family. It was a masterpiece of conscious uncoupling propaganda. It spoke of our mutual respect, our different paths, and my profound admiration for Julian's courage. While our journey as husband and wife is ending, I wrote, my journey as his biggest supporter is just beginning. To see the man I love choose authenticity over accolades is the greatest gift I could imagine. I made it impossible for him to be the bad guy. I had cast him as the romantic hero of his own story. Any complaint from him would now sound like the whining of an ungrateful fool. He was liberated. He was free. And he was completely, utterly trapped. Phase 2. The construction of the cage. Julian and Serafina were ecstatic. They found a sprawling, dilapidated warehouse in the arts district, the kind of place that was authentically gritty and ruinously expensive to make habitable. They sent me the proposal, full of romantic descriptions of raw space and industrial honesty. I approved it immediately. I didn't just approve the rent, I approved the renovation. You can't create in a space that doesn't serve your vision, I wrote in my approval email. Let's bring it up to code. Proper ventilation for your sculpting, a northern-facing skylight for the painting studio. I'll front the capital from the trust. I hired the contractors, the best ones. They were efficient, professional, and utterly devoid of the bohemian spirit Julian so admired. They turned his raw space into a perfect, climate-controlled, state-of-the-art artist's studio. It was a gallery-ready space, so pristine and well-equipped that it was intimidating. The silent pressure was built into the walls. A space this perfect demands masterpieces. Then came the supplies. Serafina sent me lists of materials, Belgian linen canvases, rare pigments from Italy, a specific type of clay from Japan. They thought they were testing my limits. They had no idea. I sourced everything. I had it delivered by the crate. Their studio filled up with the finest, most expensive art supplies money could buy. Enough to supply a small art college for a year. I was burying them in potential. I managed their life from afar with relentless, cheerful efficiency. I found them a macrobiotic meal delivery service. You need to nourish your bodies to nourish your souls. I bought them a membership to a high-end yoga and meditation center. It's crucial to maintain spiritual alignment. I paid for Serafina to attend a writer's workshop in Iowa, and for Julian to go on a research trip to Marfa, Texas. Every act of generosity was a nail in the coffin of their freedom. They wanted a messy, spontaneous life, and I had given them a meticulously scheduled, all-expenses-paid, 5-star version of it. The struggle, the core of the starving artist mythos they so admired, had been surgically removed. The first sign of trouble came about 6 months in. The requests for funds became less about art and more about life. A new transmission for Serafina's vintage Volvo, a vet bill for her rescue dog, a trip to a music festival. I approved them all, but my responses became more pointed. Of course, hope the festival provides ample inspiration for your next series of sculptures. Or, happy to cover it. Please send me a photo of the new pottery you've created with the kiln I sent. I was their patron, and a patron requires patronage. I started asking to see the work. The Trust's board is eager for a progress report, I would write, knowing full well the board was me, alone in my silent minimalist house, drinking a glass of obscenely expensive wine. The pressure mounted. The vast, empty canvases stared at them. The tons of clay sat in their moisture-controlled bins. Julian, who had spent his life managing teams and executing billion-dollar projects, was now faced with the terrifying freedom of a blank page. He had no clients, no deadlines, no parameters. Just the crushing weight of his own declared genius. He tried to paint. The results, from the few photos he sent me, were derivative and amateurish. He had the soul of a poet, perhaps, but the hands of an architect. Serafina wrote reams of poetry, but without the struggle, without the pain of a real, uncurated life. Her words felt hollow and pretentious. They were playing house in a diorama of an artist's life that I had built for them. Phase 3, the collapse. The end came, as I knew it would, in the form of a phone call. It was Julian. It had been nearly a year. His voice was thin, tired. "Elle," he said, "we need to talk." I made him come to the house, our old house. I had sold it, but the new owners hadn't moved in yet. It was empty, a hollow shell echoing with the ghosts of our life. I sat on the floor in the middle of the vast living room where he had confessed, and I waited for him. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. His clothes, which were meant to look artfully disheveled, just looked sad. He didn't look like a free spirit. He looked like a man who was lost. He told me it wasn't working. The art, the life, Serafina. He said the pressure was too much. He said creating on demand was impossible. He said he missed the structure of his old life. He missed the challenge of a difficult client, the thrill of seeing a building rise from the ground. He missed the clean lines and the solved problems. "And Serafina?" I asked, my voice neutral. She's not you, Elle," he stammered. "She's wonderful. She's a force of nature. But living with a force of nature is exhausting. There's no peace. Everything is a drama, a performance. She doesn't manage things. She experiences them. The bills don't get paid unless I call you. The car doesn't get fixed. It's all just chaos." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I made a mistake. A terrible, stupid, cliché mistake. I didn't want this life. I just wanted a vacation from our life. I wanted a fantasy, and you gave it to me. You called my bluff. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. "I did," I said. "I gave you exactly what you wrote about in your love letter to her. I funded your search for truth in a fabricated world. Did you find it?" He shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. "This is more fabricated than anything we ever had. It's a stage you built." "I used your words as the blueprint," I replied, my voice still quiet. "You said our life was a cage. You were wrong. Our life was a collaboration. It was a structure we built together. It had foundations. This life you chose, it has no foundation. It's just a collection of props. You didn't want to be an artist, Julian. You just wanted to feel like one." He finally broke. He sobbed, telling me he wanted to come home. He wanted his old job back. He wanted me back. I stood up and walked to the vast glass wall overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful. It was real. "There is no home to come back to," I said, not looking at him. "I've sold this house. Vance and Sterling has a new senior partner. They're thriving. And as for me, I'm not your wife anymore. I'm the administrator of your trust." He looked up, horrified. "What does that mean?" "It means you are free, Julian," I said, finally turning to face him. I allowed myself a small, cold smile. "You are free to be the authentic, struggling artist you always dreamed of being. The trust has about $1.5 million left. It's enough for you to live modestly for the rest of your life, as long as you keep creating. But the funding for a lavish lifestyle is over. No more contractors. No more first-class flights. No more meal deliveries. Just you, your muse, and your art. In a world with no safety nets. That's authenticity, isn't it?" I left him there, a broken man in an empty house. My revenge was complete. I hadn't destroyed him. I had simply given him what he asked for. I had forced him to live inside his own fantasy, and it had become his personal hell. He was trapped not by walls or laws, but by the weight of his own proclaimed desires. As for me, I am the sterling. And sterling is a precious metal. It's strong, it's valuable, and it shines brightest when it's polished. I took my half of our fortune, and I started my own firm, a consulting company. I help creative people build stable, successful businesses. I provide the structure for their chaos. I am an architect after all. I build things. And the best thing I ever built was my own life, rising from the ashes of the one he tried to burn down.